For 5 years now, I've wholeheartedly believed that 2018 was the best year in video games ever. From fantastic story games, to cozy yet challenging platformers, to the best version of Tetris ever, as well as the personal bias of that being the year I switched from Xbox to PlayStation and realized games could be good, 2018 stood in a league of its own. But ladies and gentlemen, we have a new contender for that spot. 2023 was a stellar year for video games. Not really on the development side of the industry with all the layoffs and leaks, including a playable build of the entirety of Wolverine so far, but from the player side, wow. What a year it has been. 2023's catalog includes games I thought I'd hate but really liked, games that revitalized a genre for me, and one of the best video games I have ever played in my life. But that one is not on my list. I don't want to spoil too much of my review, which is coming, but Alan Wake 2 is my personal 2023 Game of the Year. Funny how my favorite games of the 2 best years in gaming both got snubbed at the Game Awards. However, it is not on this list, as even though 7.5 games on this list did come out in 2023, it only features games that I played in 2023, regardless of their release date. And I played Alan Wake 2 in January of 2024. So keep that in mind going forward, and I guess that was a spoiler for my best of 2024 video, but whatever, I doubt you'll remember. Also, some quick house cleaning. I need to mention that I did not play any of these games this year, so I'm not calling them bad by not putting them on the list. I just haven't gotten around to playing them yet. But with how dry 2024 is looking, they'll probably end up on the next list because I'll just be playing catch-up all year. I also super quickly want to give some honorable mentions. Arkham Origins Blackgate was surprisingly well made and fleshed out for a Vita game. SpongeBob Cosmic Shake brought the nostalgic fun of the old games and built upon it much more than I was expecting it to. Hades was the first roguelike I've really gotten into. Power Wash Simulator was a great game to turn my brain off and play while listening to a video essay or podcast. And Jedi Survivor made me realize how much I could will myself to like a game by glossing over technical issues and completely turning off the part of my brain that thinks critically. Basically, it turned me into a Rise of Skywalker fan. But anyways, that's enough lead up. Let's get in to number 10. Back in 2018, when I got my PlayStation 4, my brother got the Crash Bandicoot Insane trilogy, and once I got a chance to play, I could not for the life of me get past that damn koala. I was much younger and had no control of my anger, and this game had me screaming and smacking my desk to the point where I said, "This is too hard for me, fuck this." Cut to 5 years later in January of 2023. I was older, wiser, and better at video games. Due to a completely turned around sleep schedule, I woke up and started my day at 1 a.m., sat down and said, let me see how far I can get in Crash Bandicoot, and I beat it in one sitting. In fact, this game is so addictive that while I was gathering footage for this video, I beat the game in one sitting again. Crash Bandicoot is one of those games where the more it kicks your ass, the more determined you are. Every death in every wooden crate that breaks over Crash's head until he is rendered completely defenseless makes you dig your heels in a little deeper and say, fuck you, I will beat this. Now, if you suck ass, that may result in a hole in your wall, but it makes it all the more satisfying when you do actually beat each level. It can be really unfair sometimes. The odds are stacked against you. You might even have to do some real fuckery at certain points. Like I said, I reject this turtle as a whole and just finagled my way on top of the rope across the bridge that way, because there was no way in hell I was making that jump. But that makes the triumph even better. When you finally beat Neo Cortex, you don't just feel like you beat a game, you feel like you overcame it. You were not supposed to win. It threw everything it had at you, but yet, here you are at the credits. Basically just rewind to the start of the Crash Bandicoot section, but pretend I'm talking about Armored Core. I was not expecting to like this game at all, given the FromSoft label. But as I played it and learned it was less of a Souls-like and more of a bullet hell, I started to really like it. I don't think it's anything outstanding, and I think that it's a little too big for its own sake. It has that AA feel to it that I really enjoy and have been missing a lot, but like most AA games, I can't really imagine it being anyone's new favorite game of all time. Despite that, this game is beautiful and really big, which makes me feel like this game had a much bigger budget than it needed, but that's one of the reasons I like it. It feels impractical that a game with combat this simple looks this good. It's so indulgent, it looks great, has plenty of spectacles to behold, it's super loud, and it's really cool to pilot a mech and blow shit up. It's like candy or fast food. It's not the best for you, definitely not the highest quality, but damn does it taste good. And you'll end up craving it a lot of the time once you're done. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge is one of the most fun co-op games you could play. It's a refreshing throwback to arcade and Super Nintendo games, with the modern advantage of couch and online multiplayer, which fits this style of game to a T. The only beat-em-up I remember really playing before this was the re-released Scott Pilgrim game because Scott Pilgrim's the tits, and I thought it was fine, which made me think that I did not like beat-em-ups. But then Shredder's Revenge was free on PS Plus Extra, and it made me think, oh shit, I can like these games. It's so vintage, not only in the era of gaming it's emulating, but it's such a time capsule to the Ninja Turtles' heyday of the late 80s, despite releasing in 2022. Like, it has so many characters and things that I'd imagine being pushed in the 80s and 90s so that kids would buy their toys, like the Party Wagon and this rat guy, while also including familiar favorites like Bebop, Rocksteady, and that one guy whose name I can never remember. I'm pretty sure he's the Terraparter. Not only can you play as the core four, but you can also play as Splinter, April, and Casey Jones, as well as a few others, and there's just so much fun to be had. It's such a highlight of the year for me, as me and my brother were just goofing off and fighting over pizzas as we ran through the story. There are practically no games that are for everyone, but I think that this is a game everyone should try. You wouldn't know from looking at them, but some of my best friends are serial losers. All they know is charge their phone and fighting games, to the point where I've been spending the better part of the last 6 years or so getting comboed to Kingdom Come whenever we play FighterZ or Street Fighter. So when I saw that Mortal Kombat 1 was releasing in 2023, it was absolutely off the table for me. But then I realized that I review video games. This was a game that I thought I would only play the story of and barely get through it. I've always thought Mortal Kombat games were too sluggish, but as I got further into this game's story, I thought, damn, this is boring as shit. Let me try spicing it up with a few combos. And I started to play the tutorials and read the move lists. Then I started using those new moves in CPU battles, and I realized this game is a lot smoother and quicker than the last ones, but especially when you understand what you're doing. I started progressing to higher and higher difficulties, and when I hit a skill wall there, my friends started playing online in private lobbies, and I fucking dominated. I probably wasn't the best in my friend group, but I was getting consistent wins. And that's actually why you never see any Mortal Kombat gameplay in my friend Kevin's videos. He doesn't want the world to see that I'm such a better Johnny Cage than he is. I do really like Mortal Kombat 1. It's probably my favorite 2D fighting game that isn't a platform fighter. And I do genuinely think that it is the 7th best game I played this year. But honestly, this whole video is nothing more than a platform for me to make a call-out post against Kevin. The Resident Evil franchise has been all over the place when trying to find a good blend of spine-chilling horror and badass biological warfare, even in the same game. They can be an apex fright fest, or a solid first half that smoothly transitions into an action-packed race for a cure, or a game where you play as a member of a military task force and punch boulders. While I have always been more partial to the smaller scale parts of the games where my life and the lives of those around me are all that's at stake, I do think that Resident Evil 4 perfectly pushes the action as far as it possibly can without becoming ridiculous. It is very high stakes, with Leon Kennedy being a special agent that went through intense training, traveling to a different continent to save the president's kidnapped daughter, but that's what I love about it. This is one of the most needlessly rad games I've ever played. You'd think that when the average person sees chainsaws burst through a wall and close in on them, they'd back away. But Leon Kennedy is not the average person. He's like that one dude in high school who would try way too hard in gym to impress everyone. He sees Ashley and says, "I gotta fucking turn up," and does a backflip. This game is so full of early 2000s action scenes that I can't help but love it, like the jet ski escape or the minecart section. And it does use that expectation you build of grandiose encounters to scare the shit out of you. You get so used to fighting giant sea monsters, huge ogres, and using catapults to take out whole groups of enemies that when you're left to fend for yourself and run out the clock in this dark-ass hallway, with just the weapons in your inventory and this fucker hunting you, it is bone-rattling. I have no evidence to back it up, but I have it in good faith that there was a sudden influx of new underwear bought proportional to the amount of RE4 copies sold, and this sequence is why. Super Mario Bros. Wonder is one of the most humiliating games I've ever played. Nintendo really leaned into the fact that this is a game for 6-year-olds. I feel like if someone who didn't know about Mario walked in on me playing this game, they'd lose so much respect for me. However, this is absolutely a must-play entry in the Mario franchise. It's not the best, I'd say, probably top 5, but it'd be a shame to hear that someone skipped arguably the most creative game in the last decade. It can get on your nerves a bit, like how it plays a spring sound effect every time you jump. But that's overshadowed by not one, but 2 very interesting concepts per level, and just how pleasing this game is to look at. It almost has a more vibrant pastel look to it, especially in the Flower Kingdom that reminds me of walking around Fantasyland in Disneyland, which fits the Mario universe incredibly well. The cartoonish redesigns and expressions of each character and enemy is charming and hilarious. Like how the Goombas freak out when they realize they're gonna die someday, the little bubble when they're snoozing, and Prince Florian's little comb over. It doesn't have the best power-ups despite having my favorite in the franchise, but that's made up for by the abundance of flower badges, each providing their own unique platforming abilities, like using a vine as a grappling hook or starting each life with a mushroom. I was a little disappointed because my expectations for Mario's big return to 2D were a little higher, but I am incredibly excited to see where Nintendo takes the franchise from here. So, this next game is very old, but also did technically come out this year and also got everyone very angry, but I do not care. Red Dead Redemption has one of the best stories I've ever played. And now you know that I'm very good at lying. Listen, this game's story is really good, especially when you look at the other games that came out in 2010. See, I lied again and you didn't realize. Alan Wake blows this game out of the water, but Red Dead Redemption's story is fantastic compared to every other game that came out in 2010, and it holds up really well. It's damn near perfect on paper, but it's not going to be for everyone. John gets jerked around by so many higher powers that he literally ends up in a different country. This whole game is doing chores for people, except the chores go from cow herding to exciting reunions and shootouts. Unlike the Perfect Angel game that nothing can touch and came out in 2018, I can see how Red Dead 1 isn't everyone's thing. Some of the gameplay mechanics aren't as fleshed out as they should be, but I truly believe that everyone should play this game at least once, even if it's not your thing, just so you can see how incredibly well written this game's characters are. The dialogue especially is unmatched. And honestly, I think the re-release is well worth it. Yeah, $50 is steep, but it's cheaper than buying an old copy and a refurbished console that can play it. After talking about 7 different games that I like in this video, let me break it up a bit and tell you some shit that I don't like. I'm not a big fan of the fantasy genre. There are plenty of great stories that can and have been told in the setting, but it's a bit of a turnoff for me. Same with top-down games. There are some great ones like Hades, but I just find it harder to get immersed in a game if it's top-down. You know what else? I get pretty overwhelmed by all the in-depth systems of RPGs, and I don't really like how in a large majority of RPGs, you don't really play as a character, it's more of a self-insert. But the one thing that makes me actively dread playing a game is when it's got turn-based combat. Fuck that shit. I'm not some nameless cannon fodder Joker goon who waits his turn to kick ass. I want to put boots to asses and knees to faces. So when I say that my third favorite game of 2023 is Baldur's Gate 3, a turn-based top-down fantasy RPG where you play as your own custom character, you better drop everything and go play this game. There is not much new that I can say about Baldur's Gate 3. People have been blowing this game since it released in August. People were 100% sure that Tears of the Kingdom was going to sweep the Game Awards, but then they played Baldur's Gate and said, yeah, I was wrong. Do you know how slim the chances are of someone on the internet admitting they're wrong? I do think it's a bit overrated, and there are a lot of problems that people overlook, but from what I've played, this was the most surprisingly pleasant game I've played in 2023. I will say, though, that I've seen people say this game is the best game ever made because of how open it is and how many branching paths there are, but I really disagree with that idea. I don't think that more open games like Baldur's Gate are inherently better or have a leg up on more straightforward games. I think linearity could use some more love. Listen, I'm a young guy. Yeah, I played and still love Spider-Man 2 to death, but I was a fucking infant when I played that game. I didn't have time to play both Spider-Man and San Andreas. My schedule was chock full of learning what shapes are. And hot take, but I think some games like San Andreas are borderline unplayable because of how clunky they are. Unless you grew up with it, the GTA trilogy is way too Cro-Magnon to connect with the way I connected with Grand Theft Auto 5. But unlike the GTA trilogy, when I picked up the controller and played Super Mario Galaxy, I got it. I fully understood just how special this game truly was. For a lot of people, this game was what Super Mario Odyssey is for me. Granted, there is a good amount to complain about. The final Bowser boss fight is underwhelming and an extended rehash of his previous fights. The toy level can be a bit too frustrating in terms of how easy it is to get set back and how parts of it can force you to take baby steps. They jumped the gun a little on fully incorporating motion controls into the gameplay when it feels a little undercooked. Fuck the spring suit. But all of that is outshined by just how fun and memorable each world is. And no, I don't mean Galaxy, I mean each world, every little rock in space you walk on. I remember this little peanut guy better than I remember entire chunks of Call of Duty campaigns. I love how vibrant it is, and the way the fluorescent bright lights of Rosalina's ship contrast against the darkness of space. And it's all tied up in a beautiful bow that is the soundtrack. And I think that's one of the reasons this game is so memorable. Each song is catchy enough to stick in your head for a long time after you put the game down, and they're all unique to the point where you know exactly where you were when you heard it. Like this song, I Was a Bee. This song, I was skating around the ice in Freeze Flame. This one, I was dying over and over because of this fucking spring suit. One of the best feelings of 2023 was after waiting 5 long years, watching the minutes count down till I could play Spider-Man 2, and finally experience what would be a new top 3 video game of all time for me. That top 3 placement was incredibly short-lived and barely made it to the new year, where this guy would blow my fucking mind, but still, the payoff of the longest I've ever waited for a game sequel was unbelievable. This is one of those sequels like Doom Eternal where once you play it, it practically replaces the game that came before. Those games still have merit to them, like I do think that even though I love Spider-Man 2's narrative, Spider-Man 1's story is just better, and has higher emotional peaks. But practically every single aspect of 2's gameplay is improved. You can swing faster, do a little loop. There's web wings, which you can use to jam through these wind tunnels. There's new abilities that can be switched out. Better side missions that even build off of the DLC. There are 2 Spider-Men to play as. The load times are non-existent. You can fast travel from the financial district to Astoria like that. Sandman literally throws Miles across entire boroughs of NYC, and he slingshots himself back with no dropped frames or technical hiccups. One of this game's biggest feats is that it has an excellent iteration of Kraven. Because when was the last good one? 2007? And we damn well know we're not going to get another good one anytime soon. This is one of the most addictive games I've ever played. It's been out for 3 months, and I already embarrassed myself with how many hours I've racked up. It's one of those games where I turn it on when I don't know what to play, and I always have a great time. I did an ultimate difficulty run with no swing assist and got my ass handed to me. I was in the sewers just dying over and over against the lizard like he was the Valkyrie Queen. And I had a smile on my face the whole time because not only is the combat evergreen, but I was just taking in the fact that I was playing a game as Spider-Man in one of the raddest versions of the symbiote suit I've ever seen, fighting and wrestling this giant lizard man trying to cure him. There is only one thing I need to preface. If you do like this game, do not go on Twitter. That is a good rule of thumb in general, but especially if you like Spider-Man 2. You are only going to see people who can't move on from the fact that Venom isn't Eddie. Because if Miles Morales taught us anything, it's that changing who's behind the mask never works. Ever.